Okay, so this week's class is about meditations of the Tanya. Now, last week's class was a little bit of an overview of the Tanya, and I'll just, in very, very brief summary, as we mentioned last week, that Freud was met the fifth Chabad Rebbe, there was a dynasty. The Tanya was from the first Chabad Rebbe. It's called like the Bible of Jewish mysticism. And he asked him, what do you do? So he said, I teach Chassidus. So he says, what is Chassidus? So he said, Chassidus is a wisdom that your mind influences your heart. So Freud said to him, aren't they two continents divided by an ocean? You know, we all know that our mind says one thing, and our heart says something else, right? The heart usually says, eat the cake, and the mind says, don't eat the cake. And it's not easy for the mind to win. It's one of the greatest challenges of life is mind over matter, right? Self-discipline, which Esty is so good at. So, in any event, so the Rebbe Rashab says, well, the goal is to at least put a bridge over the two, or at least electrical wires underneath. You have to connect the two. Because the truth is that if we don't have a connection between the mind and the heart, then in a way we're just another animal. Because an animal, like we said last time, has often a very good mind, but their mind is dominated by their emotions, by their instincts. And so, fundamentally speaking, what's very, very interesting about it is that I think a good example is every person, if you have any questions, feel free to interject, every person really is like a robot. And the robot has two main emotions. One emotion is the emotion of love, the desire for something. So if I want something, like it says in the Talmud, your feet take you where your heart wants it to go. So if your heart says, go to the fridge and get me a Coke, so your feet just follow. So the only bridge, the only thing that you can do is have a mind. And the mind says, no, it's not a good idea, right? But to get the mind to the stage where it disciplines the heart is quite a big thing. But that's only really, self-discipline is only one, in a way, small part of this big puzzle. Why? Because the heart will always be attracted to what the heart is attracted. Love and fear can go in any direction. And so the whole basis of the Tanya is that it's very easy to fulfill the Torah and mitzvahs. It's very, very simple. So you say, why is it so simple? The Alter Rebbe says it. You know, technically speaking, my body is into my pleasure. Let's say keeping kosher. It's not so simple. I'd rather just eat anything. It's not a simple thing to do. So anything that takes discipline goes against my nature. How can you say it's very easy? You say it's not difficult, but how can you say it's very easy? So it's very simple. Because you, unlike an animal, can change your nature. That's what's unique about a human being. A human being can fundamentally alter who they are. And we all know people who have really, usually, often, from great trauma, have come out with tremendous kind of greatness. You know, there was I forgot the guy's name. It's like an English lord going back. It's in the very introduction to Martin Gilbert's book. He has a very good book called he's a historian. He's done over 80 books. And he does this I forget what it's called, but they do history and maps. It's very, very interesting. And anyway, so in the introduction to his book, this English, intellectual says about the Jewish people, he says, yes, you've been beaten, but that's why you're so, welcome. What an honor. How are you?
Fine, Rabbi. I hope you're in good stead because I came to learn.
Good stuff. Okay.
I didn't come to
So we were just saying how this English lord said about the Jewish people, he said, it's true that you've been beaten, but that's why you've been molded, right? How do you actually mold something when, welcome, that is quite a pleasant surprise. Okay, so what I was saying is that, just to give a brief background, some other people just came a minute before you, so it's not only for you. So just to give a brief background, the whole idea of the Tanya is a book that is all about mind over matter. And I said that we know, can you hear me by the way? Yeah? Okay, good. So we know that there's one thing called self-discipline. We all know you need self-discipline. But that's not really getting to the heart of the issue. Why? Because you're still the same person. To really make a difference, you have to reprogram your heart. And that's really what makes us as a human being unique. You know, animals, there are studies on animals that unfortunately if an animal has anxiety in the beginning of its life, they take these little monkeys and they take away the mother, let's say for 3 hours a day. And then monkeys never recuperate. They're always like anxious. They're going to be in the back of the cage because their world now is anxious. And they can't change that. A human being has incredible power to change themselves. And really, it's an amazing thing, you know, from psychology. But a lot of psychology is fundamentally mistaken. Why? Because it's looking at this concept like this is almost like an illness. This is what it is. When in fact, you can change the whole thing if you think differently about it. And not only you think differently about it, if you begin to see a whole new picture in reality, your whole reality has changed. So it's really amazing when you look at Hasidus. Hasidus almost never goes into the past. It is always probably going into the future and going into the present. Because you can transform your present based on a better, like the concept of Mashiach. You know, they say the story that there was a Jew in the shtetl. Unfortunately, you know, he was one of these guys that couldn't really find a job. So the community would always take care of one another. And so they decided they're going to give him this position. They built a little tower at the end of the village. And they said, your job is to tell us when Mashiach comes. And so there he's been for the past 30 years. And somebody finally comes over to him. He says, how's your job? He says, listen, I got to be honest with you. It's very boring, but the job security is awesome. So, you know, there's another story where a chassid came to, you know, when the Chabad Chassidim came, really the whole belief that Mashiach is coming now very much was brought by the Chassidic community. You know, after a few thousand years, you get a little bit like... So Chabad comes to America, and the Hasidim have arrived. Now, they came to New York, Brooklyn. I mean, you grew up there, right? Crown Heights, that was a fancy neighborhood. You know, there was the doctors, with the street where the Rebbe is, was Doctor Street, and it was a blocked off street. President, you know, yeah, President, but it's like, it's a very, very, I mean, the homes there are gorgeous. Anyway, so somebody started to say, who are these Hasidim? Who are these guys? So one person said, these guys, they're crazy. They believe Mashiach could come tomorrow. So when the Rebbe heard this, he was very happy. This is a good craziness. Why? You see, it's so important to have hope. If you know, if a person's in prison, God forbid, and he knows he's going to get out tomorrow, doesn't make a difference if he was there for 50 years, he'll be very happy. God forbid, reverse it. A person's in home, and tomorrow he's going to prison, he'll be very sad. So you see the power of the right thoughts. The right thoughts can transform your reality. But the ultimate transformation it almost gets deeper than positive thinking, which is a good thing. But it gets to, so who exactly should we be? You know, if you ask someone, who are you? Effectively, they'll give you, okay, you're a psychologist, I'm sure you thought about this. Who are you?
Who am I? So typically you give all your good qualities.
All your good qualities, okay, good. So the idea is that would be connected to an emotional desire to project a positive image, right? So, but if we go beyond that for a moment, let me ask you, if I may do that question. How would you answer that question?
Who am I?
Yeah.
Well, I think that I have a very open soul.
Yeah.
And I feel that I hope I'm a good person. I believe in
Yeah.
God, and I try to do whatever I can to make the world a better place.
Right. Okay, good.
I don't think what I look like.
Yeah.
That isn't me.
That's right. Beautiful. Okay, very good. So these are qualities which you mentioned, very beautiful qualities. So the idea is that in a way is who you've become, right? So that's a personality that you've developed over many, many years. And this is a very, very important point. And it's we often think of ourselves that I am that child. And we regress. We're like, "Oy, it was so good when things were good. Why did things have to get tough? You know, why did I have to grow up?" But really what you're saying is very good because it's a positive thing. These are steps of growth. The idea of helping others, the idea of belief in God, the idea of being open. These are things that actually come usually through a bit of trauma, through a bit of change in reality. So in other words, and this is the point that I was making, and that this kind of British lord said about the Jews, yes, you've been beaten, but you've been molded. And that's a very important point because the way you get the best out of someone, it's not the ideal way. The Tanya is the ideal way where you do it in the first place. It doesn't have to go through anything negative. But it says the Jew is like an olive. When you squeeze him, out comes the oil. And the thing is, if you think about it, Jews are extraordinarily successful. If you ever ask anyone how many Jews there are, I remember I was in the Boy Scout camp, and one of the scoutmasters asked me to speak to his troop. So one of the first things I did, it was a non-Jewish troop, I said, how many Jews do you think there are? 50 million, right? If you told someone there are 15 million Jews, they say that's not even a statistical error in China, right? They'd be amazed. How is it possible that in 15 million Jews, it's like, there's a book called The Israel Test, where about 35% of major breakthroughs in science are from Jews. I believe it's 35% of Nobel Prizes. 25% of major companies, whether you say Google, Facebook, a lot of these companies are Jewish. So it's an extraordinary thing. How did that happen? And right now we're coming to Pesach. And it's a very deep, deep lesson. And if you just take this out of the class, you're very lucky. Each one of us is really infinite. We're truly infinite. We are in essence God. But we don't think we are. We think we are that body that we were born into. And to get to that essence, it's like a seed. For that seed to start growing and create a miracle, because once you grow, you create another seed, and another seed creates another seed. To get to that essence, you have to split the core husk of the seed, the outer shell. And that's why as the Jewish people, we are not compared to the sun, we're compared to the moon. Other nations, they rise and they fall. It's amazing. You look at the Egyptian Empire, the Babylonian Empire, the Roman Empire. Even in our own time, there are empires that came and went, whether it's as bad as the Third Reich, as bad as the communists. All these things, all these nations, they have their moment in the sun, even if it's a long moment. But once the sun sets, it's over. It's very interesting from a psychological perspective. A lot of these nations are looking to recapture their glory. The Jewish people are compared to a moon. It gets big, it gets small, big and small, big and small, big. What's up with that? Because growth is connecting to the divine, infinite side of you. And in that side, there's always another facet, another thing that you can learn, more that you can give. It's infinite. But you have to be able to let go of the husk, of the ego and of the identity, basically of the person who you think you are, to become the person who you can be. So the very first thing that by entering Tanya, and you see how God took us through so many different crazy circumstances, but in the end, He's always creating a better us. And that happens on a macro level and a micro level. Okay? So if you could just realize every single time there's a slide, it's because God knows that it's not an avalanche, rather it's a roller coaster. There's something bigger coming after that, right? In fact, it was a very great Rebbe, the Sfas Emes. The Sfas Emes became a Rebbe, I think when he was like 25, and he might have had like 1 million Chassidim. He was the Gera dynasty. You've heard of Gera? I don't know if you're... Yeah. It was 1 million Gera Chassidim that were unfortunately murdered in the Holocaust. So it was probably the largest Chassidic group before the Holocaust. But they were based in Poland. Anyway, so it's very, very pious, very good people. So his Zayda was the Chiddushei Harim. I think he was the first Gera Rebbe. And his Zayda was about to pass on, and he tells his 25-year-old little grandson, okay, you're going to be the next Rebbe, right? And Rebbe is not like a king, like authoritative figure. It's a teacher, and people have to buy into what you have to say. Otherwise, you can close your doors. So he said, I'm just such a young guy, and there are so many older people. So he gave him an example. He said, there was a mountain climber, and he worked very hard to climb Mount Everest. 3 months later, he gets to the top, and he sees a little kid hanging out. And he felt like, I just worked for 3 months, this little kid's hanging out here. So he said, how did you get here? He says, I was born here. So the Chiddushei Harim said, you were born on the mountain. But the rest of us are mountain climbers. You see, God gave us some people born on the mountain, Moses, but for the rest of us, we have to climb our mountains. And that makes life meaningful. Because if you didn't peak that mountain, then it wasn't you. And that's the beauty of life. The beauty of life, in fact, in a way, is its difficulty. Because its difficulty makes you become you. When you're a child, it's beautiful, but it's not you. It's just a surrounding reality. But as you toughen up and you persevere and you do mitzvahs, that really makes you into you. Okay, so this booklet, Meditations of the Tanya, is based on the Tanya. And the Tanya is really a book of meditations. And it's basically a very profound doctrine that the main emotions that we carry is love and fear. But what we want to do is make sure that our love is love for Hashem and love for the right things, and our fear is like fear of Hashem and not fear of circumstances. And if we get to that level, then our heart is we're like a new person. We're motivated in the right direction. So what I thought to do, because as you'll look in this book, there are many meditations, and this is just I took synopsis out of chapters, so it doesn't do justice to how deep these meditations are, but each one in its own right is very, very valuable. So just to get back, the main point of the Tanya, as I said before, is that it's very easy to do Torah and mitzvahs. It's easy. So the Alter Rebbe says, how can you say it's easy? By nature, it's easy to eat. It's not easy to transform my heart. And yet, he says, I'm going to give you tools that can transform your heart. You can become a super Jew. This is the book to become a super Jew. Are you ready, Janice?
More than ready.
Oh, good. Okay. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to go through a couple of different meditations. and the concepts behind them, and then you can take time to go through things on your own. And I think I decided I had to pick between it all. And I decided what I have to do is I have to speak what speaks closest to my heart. And that's what I'll share. So the first meditation, it's very interesting. It's in the 3rd chapter. So you'll see chapter 3. The first meditation is in chapter 3. The first 2 chapters I brought down, they're more directions than meditations. And this is the most fundamental meditation of the Tanya. And in fact, the first book to be studied of the Tanya is the gateway to believing in the unity of God in this world, how everything is in essence God. And there are 12 chapters that really give depth to this meditation. There was a whole nother book of 30 chapters written by his son, so we can't really do justice, but I'll give you the kernel. The whole world, the whole universe, is really energy, right? This is what we know from science today. And science has done us a tremendous favor for this meditation. Tremendous. So if you can imagine for a moment that everything is energy, just imagine that for a moment. Everything is really energy, including you. We're all energy. Now, all of that energy is only like a single kind of wavelength. There's like one wavelength, or one, like, call it a power plant, that makes all the energy that exists. So all the energy relative to that single power plant is like nothing, right? Because that power plant is the source of all that energy. Now that power plant, compared to the creator of the power plant, and the creator here is the one who makes the energy in that power plant, it's like it doesn't even, it's like a speck of dust compared to the universe. It's nothing. So now it gives you a perspective on God. That God is the source of all the energy that exists in our universe. And all of that energy, it's not even like a speck of dust compared to the width of the whole universe. And once you can conceive of the greatness of God, this creates a certain awe. And once you have an awe, that then creates an emotion, a desire to be attracted to. For example, on a human level, if you saw a great king, or maybe a great, let's say the Rebbe, or maybe, I don't know if a president does it these days, but if you saw somebody that was like, wow, that guy's like, wow, right? And so there's that wow factor, and then from the wow factor, there's an attraction factor, okay? So that's one meditation. Now, what's interesting is that the Tanya speaks about 2 basic types of meditations. One meditation is mind-based. So your mind says, wow. And because your mind says, wow, therefore your heart gets attracted to it, right? If I said, by the way, over there, there's a machine that prints money. You're like, wow, you're attracted. So there's another kind of meditation, very, very fascinating, where the mind doesn't have to be involved. All you have to do is spark the heart. For example, imagine I told you, by the way, that person is a brother of yours. Oh, wow, he's my brother, right? So I don't have to tell you he's great, I'm impressed with him, because your own heart has a connection to family. So if I spark your inner desire, which is connected to family, and I tell you that guy's really your brother, you'll be connected. Your heart will be sparked. So the Alter Rebbe, who obviously saw us on a soul level, was able to see things about us that we cannot see. And he describes how we can spark our heart into action based on subconscious kind of realities that are in our heart. So the first thing is, we as Jews are, and with the Jewish soul, we are descendants of Abraham, right? Now Abraham was called Rosh, the head, Limaminim, the first of believers. To the extent that he gave his life, many times he was willing to give his life for his beliefs. And therefore, on a soul level, he passed on a deep love and respect for God. And therefore, even if we're not conscious of it, it exists in us. So you can say, okay, but I don't really see that. But the Alter Rebbe says, I'll prove it to you. Very fascinating proof. Why would you say I don't see that? Because there are many Jewish people, maybe myself included, we're not always passionate about God. You know, we have many different passions in life, many different things we're interested in. It's not our only focus. And so suddenly you say, oh, you have this deep love and knowledge. What's going on? You know, many times in our history, a famous simple example was the Crusaders. They went to redeem the Holy Land. So they thought, why should we redeem the Holy Land? We've got all these infidels in our own land. So as they're passing through Europe, literally, they're giving Jews a choice. You can kiss the cross or die. And all the Jews, and this happened many times, the Cossacks many times, the Jews in mass choose to die. And it's never been proven with any other nation. There's no other nation that is as stubborn as a Jew. Okay, there were certain martyrs in other nations, but a stiff-necked people like us, you can forget about it. There are even reports of ancient Rome that the only people you couldn't break under torture to leave their religion were the Jewish people. So what's going on? So Alter Rebbe says, these people, were they big scholars? Were they into the books? Were they sacrificing some kind of thing that they had bought? No. To them and to you, I have no doubt if somebody came with a gun and says, right now you have to convert or die, I say, kill me. Why? Because when you're touching the Jewish soul, the identity of the Jew and the connection to God, he says, that's it. Now you're getting into sacred space. So you see, often we're not living in sacred space. We're living in the world around us as McDonald's and this and that. It's not sacred. So we're not in touch with our own neshama. That's in fact why we have mitzvahs. They get us in touch. But the Alter Rebbe says, let me teach you how to spark this sacred space within you, that it should become not just a tiny pilot light, but a burning flame. And you can use that in your mission to do Torah and mitzvahs. So let's use an example. The first example is something that we might all have difficulty in, and that's prayer, right? Judaism, particularly for us men, has a lot of prayer 3 times a day. You got to put on tefillin. It's not an easy habit to get into, I'll be honest. By nature, I'm an intellectual. I like to read, but I don't like to pray. Prayer doesn't stimulate. I mean, the truth is, if I get into it, it's quite beautiful. But when I have to do something, let's say as rote, you got to do it, it's not very stimulating. So the Alter Rebbe says like this. Say to yourself, and I have this meditation, you'll see, I think it might be around chapter 19 or so. But he says like this. Say to yourself, if I was challenged now, somebody comes to me and says, Zevi, are you ready to convert? I say, no way. I'm going to kill you. You're going to convert? No way. So why? Because you have this sacred space that you're a Jew. You're connected to God. So God is coming to you. He's saying, pray a little bit. Is it worse than death? No. So you can evoke this kind of meditation. Well, if I'm ready to give my life for this, can't I connect to it? And he uses it in another way. Let's say charity. Okay, we all need money. Money is a reality. And so to give charity takes a certain effort. You have to give up what you have, what you need. And so let's say you should give charity, but you can't really bring yourself to give charity. So you have to say to yourself, look, if this was a question of life and death for God, I would do it. So it's a question of $10. I can't do $10. So you see, this is it's a meditation. This is a very important principle of the Tanya. You see, there's a good story that sums this up. There's an old Jewish grandmother from Canada that decided to go to seek the truth in the Himalayas. So she gets to the peak of a mountain. There's a guru there. And she goes to the guru and she says, "Can I speak to the guru?" And the students, they were very, very sorry. The guru has been on a vow of silence for 3 years. She says, "Look, I'm an old Jewish woman from Canada. I don't know if I'm ever going to get back, to the Himalayas. All I want to do is say 3 words." So they have 3 days they're thinking, can she say this? He said, "Look, a little bit of Rahmanis is in order. We'll let her say her piece, and then she can go home." And the guru doesn't have to break his vow. So suddenly, first time in 3 years, there's a little bit of sunlight and he's in the lotus position. And she looks at him and he looks up. And there's a flicker in his eyes. And she says, "Come home, Aaron." So you see, the Jewish way is a very, very profound concept, very important concept. To us, meditation is not escapism. It's actually propelling you into positive action. Very important difference. Because I have a friend who became religious, told me he used to meditate on an Indian reservation for 5 hours a day. And it was beautiful. Meanwhile, everything was falling apart around him. But it was beautiful. You see, meditation, and it's a very difficult thing, and every single meditation in the Tanya always comes back to a practical Torah and mitzvahs. This is a principle in Jewish meditation. It says, "Im ratz libcha," if your heart runs to God, and you might think, what could be better than a heart running to God? It's a shuv la'echar, return to your mission in this world. Because that is your purpose. Your purpose is people. Your purpose is doing good. Your purpose is Torah and mitzvahs. Your purpose is not to be in heaven, because if it was, you wouldn't be on earth. So this is a very important principle, and that's why a Jewish meditation doesn't necessarily have to feel very good. It has to cause positive action. And that's why this meditation, which may be kind of like a relative thing, well, relative to that, it's not so difficult to give some charity, or relative to that, to not say something negative. I give my life for God. To not say Lashon Hara, I can do that. So this is enough, because this leads to a practical action. Now, okay, let's take some questions. If anybody has questions for now, and then based on the time, we'll go through other meditations.
I'd like to do a meditation.
Yes. Oh, yeah, sure.
Are we going to do one?
Oh, yeah, so we can do that.
How you progress with it?
It's not so much the typical idea of meditation, which I could do, but that's not really the point. The point here is causing